The bitter wind howled through the mountain pass, with such ferocity that Xavier could barely see 3 feet ahead of his horse. But the sound he heard cut through the storm like a knife through butter, and stopped him cold in his tracks. It was a scream, high and desperate, followed by the earth-shaking rumble that every mountain man feared more than anything else in these parts. Mitchell yanked his bay gelding to a halt, his breath creating frozen clouds in the December air as he squinted toward the white shrouded slope above. The year was 1882, and he had been riding through the Colorado Rockies for the better part of 3 days, making his way back to Snake River after delivering a herd of cattle to a ranch near Denver. The snow had started 2 days ago and had not let up since, but Mitchell knew these mountains like the back of his weathered hand. What he did not know was that today would change the entire course of his life. The Avalanche had already finished its terrible work by the time Mitchell spurred his horse toward the debris field. Snow and ice had cascaded down the mountainside, taking with it several large pines and what looked like the remains of a small wagon. His heart pounded as he dismounted, his boots sinking into the deep powder. Someone had been caught in that slide, and from the sound of that scream they might still be alive. Mitchell worked with the frantic energy of a man racing against death itself. He pulled his shovel from his pack and began digging where he had seen the wagon wheels protruding from the snow. His hands were numb despite his thick leather gloves, his face stinging from the relentless wind, but he kept digging. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and he was beginning to lose hope when his shovel struck something softer than snow. Fabric. He threw the shovel aside and began clearing the snow with his bare hands, and that was when he saw her. A woman, her face pale as the snow around her, her lips tinged blue. She was not breathing. Mitchell did not hesitate. He hauled her from the snow bank, laid her flat on the ground, and tilted her head back. He had seen a doctor in Denver do this once for a drowned man, pressing on the chest and breathing into the mouth. It seemed crazy, but Mitchell was not about to let this woman die without trying everything he could. He pressed his hands against her sternum and pushed hard, counting under his breath. Then he pinched her nose and breathed into her mouth, feeling the resistance of her cold lips against his. Once, twice, 3 times, then back to pressing on her chest. The wind screamed around them, and Mitchell knew they did not have much time. If he could not revive her soon, they would both freeze to death out here. Come on, he thought desperately. Come on, breathe. He breathed into her mouth again, and this time he felt her chest rise on its own. She coughed, violent and wet, and her eyes flew open. They were the most striking green Mitchell had ever seen, like spring grass after a rain, and they stared up at him with confusion and terror. "You are safe," he said quickly, his voice rough. "I have got you." She tried to speak but could only cough. Her whole body was shaking violently from the cold. Mitchell knew he had to get her warm immediately. He looked around and spotted an overhang of rock about 50 yards away, sheltered from the worst of the wind. He scooped the woman into his arms, surprised at how light she was, and carried her toward it, leading his horse with his other hand. Under the overhang, Mitchell worked quickly. He laid the woman down and stripped off her wet coat and dress, knowing that the wet clothing would kill her faster than the cold air. He wrapped her in his own dry blanket, and the buffalo hide he kept rolled behind his saddle. Then he gathered what dry wood he could find, protected by the overhang, and built a fire with shaking hands. The flames caught and grew, casting dancing shadows on the rock walls around them. The woman had not spoken yet, but her eyes followed his every movement. Mitchell sat beside her and rubbed her hands between his, trying to warm them. They were delicate hands, he noticed, with long fingers, not the hands of someone accustomed to hard labor. "Can you talk?" he asked gently. She swallowed hard and nodded. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Thank you. What is your name, Willa?" she said. "Willa Ellsworth." "I am Mitchell Xavier." "Mitch, what were you doing out here alone?" Willa's eyes filled with tears and she looked away. "I was traveling to Snake River. I had heard there were opportunities there for someone willing to work. But the storm came up so fast, and my horse got spooked. The wagon tipped, and then I heard this terrible sound like thunder, and then everything went white and cold and I could not breathe." Mitchell nodded, still rubbing her hands. Feeling was returning to them and color was coming back to her face, though she was still shivering. "You are lucky to be alive. Avalanches do not usually give second chances." "I know," Willa whispered. "I thought I was going to die. I could not move, could not breathe. It was like being buried alive in ice." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling wind beyond their shelter. Mitchell knew they were stuck here for the night at least. The storm was getting worse, not better, and traveling in these conditions would be suicide. "Do you have any family in Snake River?" he asked. Willa shook her head. "No family anywhere. My parents died of cholera 2 years ago in Kansas. I have been working as a seamstress wherever I could find work, but the last town I was in, the shop closed. I spent what little money I had left on that wagon and horse and supplies, hoping to make a new start. And now—" She looked at him with those green eyes and he saw the desperation in them. "Now I have nothing. The wagon is destroyed. The horse is probably dead or run off. All my supplies are buried under 20 feet of snow. I do not even have a dress anymore." She said this last part with a catch in her voice, and Mitchell saw a tear roll down her cheek. He reached out without thinking and wiped it away with his thumb. "You have your life. That is not nothing. But I have no home," Willa said, her voice breaking. "No money, no possessions, nowhere to go. What am I supposed to do?" Mitchell looked at this woman, this stranger he had pulled from the snow, and something shifted in his chest. He had been alone for so long, working his small cattle ranch outside Snake River with no one but his horse and a few ranch hands for company. He had been telling himself he was content that way, that he did not need anyone. But looking at Willa now, vulnerable and scared and trying so hard to be brave, he knew he could not leave her to face the world alone. "You do now," he said firmly. Willa blinked at him. "What? You have a home now, my ranch. It is not much, but it is solid and warm and has plenty of room. You can stay there until you figure out what you want to do next." "I could not possibly," Willa started, but Mitchell held up a hand. "You can and you will. I am not leaving you to freeze or starve or end up God knows where with no protection. That is settled." Something in his tone made it clear there was no point in arguing. Willa stared at him for a long moment, and Mitchell wondered what she saw. He was 32 years old, weathered from years of working outdoors, with dark hair that was probably too long and a beard he kept meaning to trim. He was not much to look at, he knew, and he was certainly no smooth talker. But he was honest and he kept his word, and maybe she could see that in his eyes. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Willa asked softly. Mitchell fed another piece of wood into the fire, watching the flames leap higher. "Because someone helped me once when I had nothing. Figured it was time to pass that along." They did not talk much more that night. Willa was exhausted from her ordeal, and Mitchell needed to keep watch and keep the fire going. He gave Willa some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag, and she ate it gratefully despite it being tough as leather. As the night deepened, she fell into a fitful sleep, and Mitchell sat with his back against the rock wall, his rifle across his knees, watching over her. The storm raged on through the night, but in their small shelter they were safe and warm. Mitchell found himself studying Willa's face in the firelight. She was beautiful, he realized. though he had been too focused on saving her life to notice before. She had delicate features and long dark hair that had come loose from its pins and now fell in waves around her face. She looked to be in her mid-20s, young but not too young. There was a strength in her face even in sleep, a determination in the set of her jaw. He wondered what her story really was, beyond the bare facts she had told him. What had driven her to leave Kansas and head into the mountains alone in December? That took either courage or desperation, maybe both. He found himself wanting to know everything about her, and that surprised him. Mitchell had not been interested in a woman in years, not since Sarah had died of fever 5 years ago. They had been engaged to be married, and her death had nearly destroyed him. He had thrown himself into building his ranch after that, using work to drown out the grief. He had told himself he would never let himself care about anyone that deeply again. But sitting here watching Willa sleep, he felt something stirring in his chest that he had thought was long dead. It scared him more than the avalanche had. Morning came slowly, the sky lightening to a dull gray. The storm had finally passed, leaving the world buried under several feet of fresh snow. Mitchell woke Willa gently, and they shared more jerky and water from his canteen. Her color was much better this morning, though she winced when she moved. "Are you hurt?" Mitchell asked with concern. "Just bruised, I think," Willa said. "Everything aches, but nothing feels broken." "Can you ride?" She nodded. "I think so." Mitchell went out to where he had left his horse and found the animal had weathered the storm well under the overhang. He saddled up and then helped Willa onto the horse before swinging up behind her. She tensed at first, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of the arrangement, but there was no other way. She was still wrapped in his blanket and buffalo hide, and Mitchell kept one arm firmly around her waist to keep her steady. "It is about 4 hours to the ranch in good weather," he said. "Probably 6 or 7 with all this snow. If you need to stop and rest, just say so." "I will be fine," Willa said, but Mitchell could hear the exhaustion in her voice. They rode in silence for the first hour, the horse picking its way carefully through the deep snow. The mountains rose around them, majestic and deadly in their winter beauty. Mitchell kept alert for any signs of danger, wolves or mountain lions or unstable snow that might slide again, but they saw nothing but white wilderness. "Tell me about Snake River," Willa said eventually. "What is it like?" "Small," Mitchell said. "Maybe 500 people on a good day. There is a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a doctor, and a few other businesses. Most folks in the area are ranchers or miners. It is quiet, but it is a good place. Good people. And your ranch, about 5 miles outside of town. I have got maybe 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, a barn, a house, and a few other outbuildings. I run it with 3 ranch hands, Miguel, Tom, and old Pete. They are good men, hard workers. They live in the bunkhouse." "It sounds lovely," Willa said wistfully. "It is home," Mitchell said simply. Another hour passed. Willa began to lean back against Mitchell's chest, and he realized she was falling asleep in the saddle, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the horse and the exhaustion still weighing on her. He tightened his arm around her waist to make sure she did not fall and let her sleep. The sun had come out now, bright and cold, making the snow sparkle like diamonds. It was so beautiful it almost hurt to look at. Mitchell found his thoughts drifting as they rode. What would the ranch hands think when he showed up with a woman? What would the town think? Snake River was a small place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Word would spread fast that Xavier had brought home a woman. People would talk, would speculate, would make assumptions. He found he did not care much about that. Let them talk. The important thing was that Willa was safe. But what then? She had said she would stay until she figured out what to do next. How long would that be? A few days, a few weeks, and what would he do when she left? The thought of her leaving bothered him more than it should, given that he had only known her for one night. But there was something about her, something that drew him in. Maybe it was just that he had saved her life, creating a bond between them. Or maybe it was something more. Willa stirred against him and lifted her head. "I am sorry. I fell asleep." "You needed it," Mitchell said. "We are making good time, should be there in a few more hours. Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you never marry? A man with a ranch needs a wife, does he not?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "I was going to marry once. Her name was Sarah. She died of fever 5 years back, about a month before the wedding." "I am so sorry," Willa said softly. "It was a long time ago. But you still miss her." It was not a question. Mitchell nodded slowly. "Every day. But the pain is not as sharp as it used to be. Time does that, I guess." "My mother used to say that grief is the price we pay for love," Willa said. "The deeper the love, the deeper the grief." But she also said that we should not let grief stop us from loving again, because a life without love is not much of a life at all. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Willa said, and Mitchell heard the sadness in her voice. "I miss her so much sometimes it feels like I cannot breathe." Without thinking, Mitchell squeezed her waist gently, offering what comfort he could. They rode on in companionable silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts and memories. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western peaks when they finally crested the last rise, and Mitchell's ranch came into view below. It was a modest spread, but Mitchell had always been proud of it. The house was a solid 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide front porch. The barn was large and well maintained, and there were several other outbuildings scattered around the property. Cattle dotted the snow-covered fields, dark shapes against the white. "There it is," Mitchell said. "Home." Willa sat up straighter, looking down at the ranch with interest. "It is wonderful," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. They rode down the slope toward the house. As they approached, Mitchell saw Miguel come out of the barn, and his friend's eyes widened in surprise when he saw the woman in front of Mitchell. Miguel was a compact man in his 40s with graying black hair and a thick mustache. He had worked for Mitchell for 3 years and had become a good friend. "Boss," Miguel called out. "We were starting to worry. That storm was a bad one." "I am fine," Mitchell said, reining the horse to a stop in front of the house. "Miguel, this is Willa Ellsworth. She got caught in an avalanche up in the pass. She will be staying with us for a while." Miguel's eyebrows rose, but he was too polite to ask the obvious questions. "Welcome, miss. You need any help, you just holler." "Thank you," Willa said. Mitchell dismounted and then helped Willa down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her quickly. "Easy now. You have been through a lot." He kept his arm around her as he led her up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was warm, with a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a rough-hewn table and chairs, some comfortable-looking furniture near the fireplace, and a cast-iron stove for cooking. Stairs at the back led up to the second floor. "It is not fancy," Mitchell said, suddenly seeing the place through Willa's eyes and feeling self-conscious about it. "It is perfect," Willa said, and again she sounded sincere. "I cannot remember the last time I was somewhere that felt like a real home." Something in Mitchell's chest warmed at her words. "You must be exhausted. Let me show you to a room where you can rest. But first, you need some proper clothes." He went upstairs and rummaged through a trunk in his own room, pulling out one of his shirts and a pair of trousers. They would be too big for her, but they were clean and dry. He brought them back down and handed them to her. "I know they are not much, but they will do until we can get you some proper dresses. There is a room at the top of the stairs on the right. You can change there. I will heat up some stew for when you are ready." Willa took the clothes, her fingers brushing against his. "Thank you, Mitchell, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," he said gruffly. "Just get some rest." She nodded and headed upstairs. Mitchell watched her go, then turned to the stove and began heating up the pot of stew that Miguel had left simmering. He was ladling it into bowls when Willa came back down. She was swimming in his clothes, the shirt hanging off one shoulder and the trousers cinched tight with a belt but still too long. Her feet were bare. She should have looked ridiculous, but somehow she still looked beautiful. They ate in silence at first, both too hungry to talk. The stew was thick with beef and vegetables, and Mitchell watched with satisfaction as Willa cleaned her bowl and accepted a second helping. When they had both finished, they moved to the chairs by the fireplace. The sun had set now, and the room was lit only by the flames dancing in the hearth. "Tell me about your ranch," Willa said. "How did you come to have it?" Mitchell leaned back in his chair, stretching his legs out toward the fire. "I came out west when I was 18, back in 1868. I worked as a ranch hand for a few different places, saved up every penny I could. When I was 25, I had enough to buy this land. It was nothing but empty grassland then. I built the house myself, one log at a time, built the barn, bought my first dozen cattle. It has been 7 years of hard work, but I have built something good here." "You should be proud," Willa said. "Not many men could do what you have done." "What about you?" Mitchell asked. "What did you do back in Kansas?" "I worked in my mother's dress shop from the time I was a little girl," Willa said. "After she and my father died, I kept the shop going for a while, but it was hard without them. The town was small and there was not much business. Eventually, I had to sell the shop just to pay their debts. After that, I moved from town to town, working as a seamstress wherever I could find work. But it was never enough to really get ahead, you know. I was just surviving, not living." "So you decided to come to Colorado." "I heard there were mining towns out here where they needed seamstresses, where I might be able to save up enough to open my own shop again. It seemed like a chance for a fresh start." She laughed bitterly. "Some fresh start." "Hey," Mitchell said firmly. "You are alive. You are here. That is something." Willa looked at him, and in the firelight her eyes seemed to glow. "You are right, and I am grateful, more grateful than I can say." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down. Mitchell knew he should send her up to bed, knew she needed rest, but he found himself reluctant to end the evening. It had been a long time since he had shared his home with anyone, and having Willa here felt right in a way he could not quite explain. Finally, Willa stood and stretched. "I should let you get some sleep. Thank you again for dinner and for everything else." "Willa," Mitchell said, standing as well. "I meant what I said earlier. You can stay here as long as you need. No rush, no pressure, just focus on getting your strength back." She smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Good night, Mitchell." "Good night." He watched her climb the stairs, and then he banked the fire and headed up to his own room. He lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about green eyes and dark hair and a woman's voice saying she had no home. Tomorrow he would ride into town and get her some proper clothes. Tomorrow he would figure out how to explain her presence to the nosy neighbors. Tomorrow he would start trying to puzzle out these strange new feelings churning inside him. But tonight, he was just grateful that he had heard that scream in the storm. Grateful that he had been able to dig fast enough. Grateful that she was alive and safe under his roof. He fell asleep with a smile on his face. The next few days fell into an easy rhythm. Willa proved to be an early riser, and Mitchell would come downstairs each morning to find her already up, coffee brewing on the stove. She insisted on earning her keep by cooking and cleaning, and Mitchell did not have the heart to argue with her. The truth was, the house had never looked better or smelled better. Willa's cooking was worlds better than the simple fare he and the ranch hands usually managed. On the third day, Mitchell hitched up the wagon and drove Willa into Snake River to buy her some proper clothes. The town was bustling despite the cold, with people going about their business. Mitchell helped Willa down from the wagon in front of the general store, very aware of the eyes watching them from windows and doorways. Small towns loved gossip, and he and Willa were providing plenty of it. Inside the store, Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor's wife, greeted them with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Mitchell Xavier, as I live and breathe. And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Miss Willa Ellsworth," Mitchell said. "She is staying at my ranch for a time. She needs some dresses and other necessities." Mrs. Henderson's smile grew even more fixed. "I see. Well, we have some ready-made dresses that might do. Follow me, dear." While Willa looked at dresses, Mitchell wandered the store, picking up supplies he needed. He could hear Mrs. Henderson peppering Willa with questions, trying to ferret out information. But Willa handled her with grace, giving polite but vague answers that revealed nothing. When they were done shopping, Mitchell loaded the packages into the wagon and helped Willa up. As they were leaving town, they passed the church, and Mitchell saw Reverend Cole standing outside. The Reverend was a good man, one of the few people in Snake River whose opinion Mitchell actually cared about. He pulled the wagon to a stop. "Reverend," he called out, "good to see you." Reverend Cole walked over, a tall man in his 50s with kind eyes and a shock of white hair. "Mitchell, I heard you had a visitor. This must be Miss Ellsworth." "Word travels fast," Mitchell said dryly. "It does indeed. Miss Ellsworth, welcome to Snake River. I hope you will join us for services on Sunday." "I would like that very much, Reverend," Willa said. "Excellent. And Mitchell, perhaps you and Miss Ellsworth would join me and my wife for dinner one evening. Margaret has been saying we need to have you over, and now we have double the reason." "We would be honored," Mitchell said, surprised and touched by the offer. They said their goodbyes and headed back to the ranch. Willa was quiet on the drive, and Mitchell glanced at her a few times, wondering what she was thinking. "You do not need to worry about what people think," he said finally. "Let them gossip. They will get tired of it eventually." "I know," Willa said. "It is just strange being the subject of speculation, and I hate that my being here might damage your reputation." "My reputation can handle it," Mitchell said firmly. "Besides, the Reverend invited us to dinner. That is his way of giving his stamp of approval. Once the Reverend and his wife accept you, the rest of the town will follow. You seem very sure of that. I have lived here a long time. I know how things work." Back at the ranch, Willa immediately went upstairs to try on her new clothes. When she came back down wearing a simple blue calico dress that actually fit her, Mitchell felt his breath catch. She looked lovely, the blue bringing out the green of her eyes. "It fits well," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. Willa smiled and did a little twirl. "It feels wonderful to be in a proper dress again. Thank you for taking me to town. My pleasure." That evening, after dinner, they sat by the fire again as had become their habit. Willa had brought down some mending, and her hands moved deftly with the needle and thread as they talked. Mitchell found himself telling her stories about the ranch, about the cattle drives he had been on, about the time old Pete had wrestled a bear and somehow lived to tell about it. Willa laughed at his stories, a sound that Mitchell was rapidly becoming addicted to. "You love it here," Willa said. "I can hear it in your voice when you talk about the ranch and the land." "I do," Mitchell admitted. "I cannot imagine living anywhere else. When I'm out there with the cattle, with the mountains all around me and the sky stretching on forever, I feel free, like I am part of something bigger than myself." "That sounds beautiful," Willa said wistfully. "I would love to see the ranch properly, not just the view from the house." "I will take you riding tomorrow if the weather holds," Mitchell offered. "Show you around the place." Willa's face lit up. "Really? I would love that." The next morning dawned clear and cold. After breakfast, Mitchell saddled 2 horses and helped Willa mount a gentle mare named Daisy. He had not been sure if she could ride, but she settled into the saddle with easy confidence. "My father loved horses," she explained when she saw his surprised look. "He taught me to ride when I was just a little girl." They rode out across the ranch, Mitchell pointing out the boundaries of his land and explaining how he managed the herd. The cattle were scattered across the winter pasture, their breath steaming in the cold air. Beyond the pastures, the mountains rose in stark white majesty against the blue sky. Willa was entranced by it all. She asked intelligent questions about the ranch operations, and Mitchell found himself enjoying explaining things to her. Most women he knew had no interest in cattle or ranching, but Willa seemed genuinely fascinated. They rode for hours, stopping to rest the horses by a half-frozen stream. Mitchell helped Willa down and they stood side by side, looking out over the land. "It is the most beautiful place I have ever seen," Willa said softly. "You are lucky to have this." "I know," Mitchell said. Then, without quite meaning to, he added, "But it can be lonely sometimes, running a ranch alone." Willa looked at him, and something passed between them, some understanding that did not need words. Mitchell felt his heart start to beat faster. She was standing so close he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of the lavender soap she had used that morning. "Mitch," she said quietly, and he loved the way his name sounded in her voice. He was leaning toward her, drawn by a force he could not name, when Daisy whinnied loudly and shied away from something in the bushes. The moment broke. Mitchell spun around, his hand going instinctively to the pistol at his hip, but it was just a rabbit darting through the undergrowth. He let out a breath and turned back to Willa. She was staring at the ground, her cheeks flushed. The moment was gone, but the feeling lingered between them like smoke. "We should head back," Mitchell said, his voice rough. "It will be dark soon." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. There was an awareness between them now, an acknowledgement of something growing that neither of them was quite ready to name. That night, Mitchell lay in bed unable to sleep. He kept thinking about how close he had come to kissing Willa by the stream. He wanted to, God knew he wanted to, but was it too soon? They had only known each other a week, and what did Willa feel? Did she feel this pull between them too, or was he imagining it? More than that, he was afraid. Afraid of opening his heart again and losing someone else. Afraid that Willa would decide to leave once she was back on her feet. Afraid that she could never care for a simple rancher the way he was beginning to care for her. Downstairs, Willa was having similar thoughts. She sat by the dying fire, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the coals. She had felt it today, that moment by the stream when Mitchell had looked at her like she was something precious. Part of her had wanted him to kiss her, had wanted it desperately. But the other part, the cautious part that had been hurt before, held her back. She liked Mitchell. More than liked him if she was being honest with herself. He was kind and strong and honorable, and she felt safe with him in a way she had never felt with anyone else. But she also knew she was in a vulnerable position. She had no money, no home of her own, nothing to offer him but herself. If something happened between them, would it be real, or would it just be gratitude and circumstance? Willa did not have answers to these questions. She only knew that she looked forward to seeing Mitchell every morning, that his smile made her day brighter, that the sound of his voice made her feel warm inside. She was falling for him, she realized. Maybe she had been falling for him since the moment he pulled her from the snow. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Sunday came, and Mitchell and Willa rode into town for church services. Reverend Cole's sermon was about love and community, about caring for strangers and welcoming those in need. Mitchell could not help but feel like the Reverend was speaking directly to him and Willa. After the service, several townspeople approached them, introducing themselves to Willa and welcoming her to Snake River. Mrs. Henderson was notably absent from this welcoming committee, but most people seemed friendly enough. Dinner at the Reverend's house that evening was a warm affair. Margaret Cole was a plump, cheerful woman who made Willa feel immediately at ease. Over roast chicken and potatoes, the conversation flowed easily. Reverend Cole asked Willa about her background, and she told them the same story she had told Mitchell, about her parents' death and her search for a new start. "You have been through so much," Margaret said sympathetically. "But you are here now, and that is what matters. Snake River is a good place for fresh starts. Why, I know several people who came here with nothing and built wonderful lives. Mitchell is one of them," Reverend Cole added, smiling at Mitchell. "He came here as a young man with just the clothes on his back and a head full of dreams. Now look at him. He has built one of the finest ranches in the county." Mitchell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, not used to such praise. "I just worked hard, Reverend. Nothing special about that." "Hard work is special," the Reverend said, "especially when it is combined with integrity and compassion. You are a good man, Mitchell Xavier. This town is lucky to have you." After dinner, as they were preparing to leave, Margaret pulled Willa aside. "My dear," she said quietly, "I can see the way you and Mitchell look at each other. Don't be afraid of it. Life is short and love is precious. If you have found something special with him, hold on to it with both hands." Willa blushed. "I do not know what you mean." Margaret smiled knowingly. "I think you do. Just remember what I said." On the ride back to the ranch, Mitchell and Willa were both quiet, lost in their own thoughts. The night was clear and cold, with a million stars scattered across the black sky. Mitchell pointed out constellations, and Willa listened, fascinated. When they got home, they lingered on the porch, neither wanting to go inside and end the evening. "I like the Reverend and his wife," Willa said. "They are good people." "The best," Mitchell agreed. "They have been very good to me over the years." "Margaret said something to me before we left," Willa said hesitantly. "She said that life is short and love is precious, that if you find something special, you should hold on to it." Mitchell's heart started pounding. "Did she now?" "Yes." Willa turned to face him, and in the moonlight she looked ethereal, like something from a dream. "Mitch, can I ask you something? Anything? What is happening between us? This feeling, this pull, am I imagining it?" Mitchell took a step closer to her. "You are not imagining it." "Then what is it?" He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think I am falling in love with you, Willa. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other 2 weeks, but I cannot deny what I feel." Willa's eyes widened, and for a moment Mitchell was afraid he had spoken too soon, had ruined everything. But then she smiled, a beautiful smile that lit up her whole face. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been trying to convince myself it is just gratitude, that it cannot be real, but it is. I feel it every time I look at you." Mitchell cupped her face in his hands, his thumb stroking her cheek. "Can I kiss you, please?" Willa breathed. He lowered his mouth to hers slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not pull away. When their lips met, it was like coming home. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened as weeks of longing and denied attraction poured out. Willa's arms came up around his neck, and Mitchell pulled her closer, wanting to eliminate any distance between them. When they finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, Mitchell rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment you opened your eyes in the snow." Willa laughed softly. "Even when I was half frozen and coughing up snow, even then." He kissed her again, unable to help himself. "Stay with me, Willa, not just for now. Stay forever. Make this your home for real." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Willa asked, her eyes searching his. "Not yet," Mitchell said. "I know it is too soon for that, but I am asking you to give us a chance, to see where this goes, to let yourself belong here, to let yourself belong with me." "I want that," Willa said, "more than anything. But Mitch, I need to know that you are sure. I do not want you to feel obligated because you saved my life. I do not want you to wake up one day and regret this." Mitchell shook his head firmly. "The only thing I would regret is letting you go. I am sure, Willa, as sure as I have ever been about anything." She kissed him then, standing on her toes to reach his lips, and Mitchell thought his heart might burst from happiness. They stood on the porch for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing under the stars. Winter gave way to early spring, and Willa settled into life on the ranch as if she had always belonged there. She took over all the household duties, transforming the house into a real home with curtains on the windows, flowers in vases, and the constant smell of fresh bread and cooking. The ranch hands adored her. Miguel taught her some Spanish. Old Pete told her outrageous stories that made her laugh, and Tom brought her wildflowers he picked on his rides. But it was with Mitchell that Willa truly came alive. They were inseparable, working together during the day and sitting by the fire together at night. They took long rides across the ranch, with Mitchell teaching her everything he knew about running a cattle operation. Willa proved to be an eager student, asking thoughtful questions and offering surprisingly good suggestions. Mitchell found himself consulting her on business decisions, valuing her opinion. She had a good head for numbers and organization, skills she had developed running her mother's dress shop, and she helped him set up a proper accounting system for the ranch. Under her management, they were actually making more money than they ever had before. But the best times were the quiet moments, sitting together watching the sunset, dancing in the kitchen to no music but the rhythm of their own hearts, stolen kisses in the barn when Mitchell was supposed to be working, long conversations where they shared their dreams and fears and memories. Mitchell told Willa all about Sarah, and it did not hurt as much as he thought it would. Willa held his hand and listened, and he knew she understood that you could honor the past while still embracing the future. Willa told him about her childhood, about learning to sew at her mother's knee, about the crushing loneliness after her parents died. She told him about the men who had tried to court her before, men she had rejected because something had always felt off, not right. "I was waiting for you," she said one night. "I just did not know it yet." As spring bloomed across the ranch, bringing with it green grass and wildflowers and newborn calves, Mitchell knew it was time. He had known for weeks now, really. He loved Willa with everything in him, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. He wanted to wake up next to her every morning and fall asleep holding her every night. He wanted to build a future with her, to raise children with her, to grow old with her. One evening in late April, Mitchell asked Willa to take a walk with him. He led her to a spot on a hill that overlooked the ranch, where you could see the house and barn and pastures spread out below, with the mountains rising behind. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and pink. "This is my favorite place on the whole ranch," Mitchell said. "I used to come here when I was building the house, when things were hard and I was not sure I would make it. I would stand here and imagine what it would be like when the ranch was finished, when I had built something real. But you know what? In all those imaginings, I was always alone." He turned to face Willa, taking both her hands in his. I never imagined someone like you. I never imagined what it would be like to have a partner, someone to share all of this with. Someone who makes every day brighter just by being in it. Someone I love more than my own life." "Mitch," Willa said softly, her eyes shining. He knelt down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a single diamond, nothing fancy but the best he could afford. "Willa Ellsworth, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my home?" Tears were streaming down Willa's face, but she was smiling the brightest smile Mitchell had ever seen. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Mitchell stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her as the sun set behind them, bathing them in golden light. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, Willa held her hand up to admire the ring. "It is perfect," she said. "You are perfect. All of this is perfect." "When should we get married?" Mitchell asked. "I do not want to wait long." "Neither do I," Willa said. "What about June? That gives us 2 months to plan. Is that enough time?" "I would marry you tomorrow if you wanted," Mitchell said, and he meant it. They walked back to the house hand in hand, both giddy with joy. When they told Miguel and the other ranch hands the news, there was cheering and backslapping and congratulations all around. Old Pete even wiped away a tear, though he tried to hide it. The next day, they rode into town to tell Reverend Cole and to arrange for him to perform the ceremony. Word spread quickly through Snake River that Mitchell Xavier and Willa Ellsworth were engaged to be married, and this time the gossip was happy. Even Mrs. Henderson unbent enough to congratulate them, though she still had a pinched look about her mouth. The next 2 months flew by in a whirl of planning and preparation. Margaret Cole took Willa under her wing, helping her plan the wedding and introducing her to all the women in town. Willa was quickly accepted into the social fabric of Snake River, joining the church ladies' sewing circle and helping organize the spring social at the town hall. Mitchell watched Willa bloom in this environment, seeing her confidence grow as she made friends and found her place in the community. She was happy here, truly happy, and that made him happier than he had ever been. For the wedding dress, Willa wanted to make her own. She ordered fine white fabric from Denver and spent her evenings sewing by lamplight, her needle flashing as she created something beautiful. She would not let Mitchell see the dress before the wedding, saying it was bad luck, but he could tell from the scraps of fabric and lace lying around that it was going to be spectacular. June 14th, 1883, dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for a wedding. The ceremony was to be held in the small church in Snake River, followed by a celebration at the ranch. Mitchell stood at the altar, his hands sweating despite the relative cool of the church interior. Miguel stood beside him as his best man, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday suit. The church was packed with people. It seemed like everyone in Snake River had turned out for the wedding. Mitchell saw ranchers and miners, shopkeepers and their wives. Even the mayor was there, but he barely saw any of them. His eyes were fixed on the back of the church, waiting for Willa to appear. And then she did, walking down the aisle to the music of the church organ, and Mitchell forgot how to breathe. The dress was stunning, white silk with delicate lace at the collar and sleeves, fitted at the waist and flowing to the floor. But it was not the dress that made his heart stop. It was Willa herself, radiant with happiness, her eyes locked on his as she walked toward him. She carried a simple bouquet of wildflowers, and her dark hair was pinned up with a few curls framing her face. She wore the only jewelry Mitchell had ever seen on her, a small locket that had belonged to her mother. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. When she reached the altar, Mitchell took her hand, and they turned to face Reverend Cole together. The Reverend smiled at them both with genuine warmth. "Dearly beloved," he began, and Mitchell tried to focus on the words, but all he could think about was that in a few minutes, Willa would be his wife. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When Reverend Cole pronounced them husband and wife and told Mitchell he could kiss his bride, Mitchell did not hesitate. He pulled Willa into his arms and kissed her soundly, and the church erupted in cheers and applause. They walked back down the aisle together as Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, and Mitchell felt like his chest might explode with joy. Outside the church, people threw rice and called out congratulations. Mitchell helped Willa into the wagon he had decorated with ribbons and flowers, and they drove back to the ranch with a procession of wagons and riders following behind. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food that the women of Snake River had brought. There was roast beef and chicken, fresh bread and pies, cakes and cookies. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing on the grass. Mitchell danced with his bride again and again, never wanting to let her go. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Mitchell and Willa snuck away to the house. Mitchell carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the living room. The house was quiet after the noise of the party, and they stood for a moment just looking at each other. "Hello, husband," Willa said softly. "Hello, wife," Mitchell replied, and the word felt like honey on his tongue. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she melted into him. They made their way upstairs to the bedroom, leaving a trail of clothes behind them. Mitchell had never known such joy, such completeness. When he held Willa in his arms that night, skin against skin, heart beating against heart, he knew he had found his other half, the piece of himself that had always been missing. The next few years were the happiest of Mitchell's life. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing larger and more profitable each year. They bought more land, increased their herd, and built a new barn. Mitchell built onto the house as well, adding more bedrooms because Willa wanted a big family. Their first child came in the spring of 1884, a healthy baby boy they named William after Willa's father. Mitchell had been terrified during the birth, pacing outside the bedroom while the doctor and Margaret Cole attended to Willa. When he finally heard the baby's cry and was allowed in, the sight of Willa holding their son made him fall in love with her all over again. William was followed by a daughter, Grace, in 1886, and then another son, Thomas, in 1888. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Mitchell loved being a father, loved teaching his sons to ride and his daughter to rope calves. Willa was a wonderful mother, patient and loving but firm when she needed to be. The ranch hands became like family. Miguel was Uncle Miguel to the children, and he taught them Spanish words and let them ride his horse. Old Pete told them the same outrageous stories he had once told their mother, and Tom carved them wooden toys. Snake River continued to grow and prosper as well. More people moved to the area, drawn by the opportunities in ranching and mining. The town got a proper school, and when William turned 6, he started attending classes there. Mitchell and Willa hosted church socials and town meetings at their ranch, becoming pillars of the community. But despite all the activity and growth, Mitchell's favorite times were still the quiet evenings with Willa. After the children were in bed, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains and talk about their day. Sometimes they would not talk at all, just sit in comfortable silence, Willa's head on Mitchell's shoulder, and that was enough. One evening in the fall of 1892, when they had been married nearly 10 years, Mitchell and Willa sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. William was 8 now, tall for his age and already showing signs of being a natural horseman. Grace was 6, with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn determination. Thomas was 4, a ball of energy who never stopped moving. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Willa asked, her hand finding Mitchell's. "Some days it feels like just yesterday that I pulled you out of that snow," Mitchell said. "Other days it feels like you have always been here, like I cannot remember a time without you." "I think about that day sometimes," Willa said quietly, "about how close I came to dying. If you had not heard me scream, if you had not been riding through that pass at that exact moment, I would be dead. And none of this would exist. Our children would not exist." Mitchell squeezed her hand. "But I did hear you, I was there. And this is real, all of it. I know. And I am so grateful. Grateful for you, for our life together, for everything we have built." She turned to look at him, her eyes serious. "You saved my life that day, Mitch. But you did more than that. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," Mitchell said roughly. "Before you, I was just going through the motions. The ranch was successful, but it was empty. I was empty. You filled up all those hollow places inside me. You made me whole." They kissed as the sun set, their children's laughter ringing in the background, and Mitchell thought about how far they had come. From that terrifying moment in the Avalanche to this perfect evening, surrounded by love and life and everything they had created together. More years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. William grew into a fine young man, taking on more and more responsibility around the ranch. By the time he was 16, he could handle just about any task Mitchell threw at him. Grace proved to have inherited her mother's head for numbers and organization, taking over much of the ranch's bookkeeping when she was just 14. Thomas was the adventurer of the family, always exploring, always getting into scrapes, but with a good heart and a quick laugh. In 1898, Willa found out she was expecting again, much to their surprise. She was 41 now, and they had thought their family was complete, but life had other plans. Their 4th child, a daughter they named Sarah after Mitchell's first love, was born healthy and squalling in January of 1899. Willa had insisted on the name, saying that Sarah deserved to be remembered and honored. Mitchell had loved her even more for that generous gesture. By 1900, William was courting a girl from town, a sweet young woman named Alice who Mitchell and Willa both approved of. They married in the spring of 1901, and Mitchell built them a house on the ranch, knowing that William would take over the operation eventually. It felt right, passing on what he had built to his son, continuing the legacy. Grace shocked them all by announcing she wanted to go to college in Denver to study business. In 1902, at the age of 18, she left for the city. Mitchell missed her terribly, but he was proud of her determination to make her own way in the world. Willa wrote her long letters every week, and Grace came home for holidays, full of stories about her classes and her adventures in the big city. Thomas, ever the wanderer, left home at 19 to join a cattle drive heading to Montana. Mitchell understood the boy's need to see the world before settling down. He had been the same way at that age. He just made Thomas promise to come home safe. Young Sarah grew into a happy, curious child who loved animals, and was never happier than when she was in the barn helping her father with the horses. Mitchell doted on her shamelessly, this unexpected gift they had been given in middle age. In 1907, 25 years after that fateful day in the Avalanche, Mitchell and Willa celebrated their silver wedding anniversary. William and Alice threw them a huge party at the ranch, and it seemed like half of Colorado showed up. There were people there from 3 counties, all come to celebrate the couple that had become a fixture in the community. Reverend Cole, now in his 80s but still sharp as a tack, gave a toast. 25 years ago, I married these two wonderful people, and I thought then that they were meant for each other. Time has proven me right. They have built a beautiful life together, raised wonderful children, and been a blessing to everyone who knows them. To Mitchell and Willa, may you have many more years together. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Mitchell looked around at the crowd, at his children and grandchildren, at the friends they had made over the years, at the ranch that had grown from a dream into a thriving reality. But most of all, he looked at Willa, still beautiful at 50, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her green eyes still bright and full of love. "What are you thinking?" she asked him later, after the party had ended and they were alone on the porch. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Mitchell said. "About how one moment, one decision to ride through that pass on that particular day changed everything. What if I had taken a different route? What if I had been an hour earlier or later? I would have missed you completely and my whole life would have been different." "But you did not miss me," Willa said, taking his hand. "You found me, you saved me, and we built this beautiful life together. That is not luck, my love. That is fate." Mitchell pulled her close, and they sat together watching the stars come out, just as they had done thousands of nights before and would do thousands of nights to come. The ranch was quiet now, settled in for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and cattle lowed softly in response. The mountains stood watch over them, eternal and unchanging. "I love you," Mitchell said. "I have loved you since the moment you opened your eyes in the snow, and I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you," Willa replied. "You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive. You are my heart, Mitchell Xavier." They kissed in the starlight, and it was just as sweet as the first time, just as full of promise and passion. After 25 years, the fire between them had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, fed by years of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, sick children and dying cattle, money troubles and difficult neighbors. But they had weathered it all together, and that made all the difference. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own blessings and challenges. Grace graduated from college and surprised everyone by moving back to Snake River and opening her own business, a combination general store and bookshop that quickly became the heart of the town. She never married, saying she was too busy with her business, and Mitchell suspected she was happier that way. She was fiercely independent, his daughter, and he respected that. Thomas returned from his wandering when he was 25, having seen enough of the world to know that home was where he wanted to be. He married a school teacher from the next town over, a smart woman named Helen, and they settled on the ranch, building their own house near Williams. Mitchell loved having his family close, loved watching his grandchildren run wild across the same land where their fathers and mother had played. By 1910, Mitchell was 58 years old and starting to feel his age. His back ached in the mornings, and he could not work quite as hard or as long as he used to. But he was content to let William take on more of the day-to-day operations while he focused on the things he loved most, spending time with Willa and their grandbabies, riding the ranch on quiet afternoons, sitting on the porch and remembering. Sarah, now 11, was his constant companion. She followed him everywhere, asking endless questions about the ranch and the cattle and the horses. Mitchell answered every one patiently, knowing that she would be the one to carry on his love for this land into the next generation. She had his gift with horses, could gentle the wildest Mustang with just her voice and her touch. Willa, at 53, was as beautiful to Mitchell as she had been at 25. Her hair was completely silver now, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth, but to him, she was perfect. She still ran the household with graceful efficiency, still cooked the best meals in 3 counties, still made his heart race when she smiled at him. One afternoon in the spring of 1911, Mitchell and Willa took a ride up to the spot where he had proposed all those years ago. They did this every year on their anniversary, a tradition that had become sacred to them. They stood on the hill looking down at the ranch, and Mitchell marveled at how much it had grown. Where once there had been just his house and barn, now there were several houses, multiple barns and outbuildings, corrals full of horses, and fields dotted with hundreds of cattle. "We built something good here," Mitchell said. "We did," Willa agreed. "And it will continue after we are gone. Our children will carry it on, and their children after them." "I hope they remember," Mitchell said. "I hope they remember how it started, with you buried in the snow and me pulling you out. I hope they remember that love and hard work can build something lasting." "They will remember," Willa assured him. "We will make sure they remember." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the clouds drift across the sky. Mitchell thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The avalanche, the desperate digging, the first breath of life. Those early days when they had been strangers learning to live together. The growing attraction, the first kiss, the proposal, the wedding, the children, the years of work and joy and love. It had all been worth it, every moment. "I would do it all again," he said suddenly. "If I had to go back and do it all over, I would not change a single thing." Willa looked at him with those green eyes that still took his breath away. "Neither would I. Every moment, every choice, every challenge, it all led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, and that evening they gathered the whole family for dinner. William and Alice came with their 5 children. Thomas and Helen brought their 3. Grace rode out from town. Sarah was already there, of course. The table was crowded and loud, with children chattering and adults laughing and food being passed back and forth. Mitchell sat at the head of the table with Willa at his right hand, and he looked around at all these people, this family they had created, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what it had all been for. This love, this life, this legacy. After dinner, when the children were playing outside and the adults were enjoying coffee on the porch, William raised his cup in a toast. "To Ma and Pa," he said. "For building this place, for building this family, for showing us what love and commitment look like. Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to you." "Hear, hear," echoed around the porch, and Mitchell felt his eyes sting with tears. He was not usually an emotional man, but sometimes the gratitude and love he felt for his family overwhelmed him. "We are the lucky ones," he said when he could trust his voice. "You children, you grandchildren, you have made our lives richer than we ever imagined possible. Thank you for that." The sun set in a blaze of orange and pink and gold, painting the mountains in fire. The family sat together watching it, 3 generations gathered in love and peace, and Mitchell thought that if he died tomorrow, he would die a happy man. But Mitchell did not die. He lived on for many more years, watching his grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own. He and Willa celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th, then their 40th. They grew old together, their hair turning white, their steps growing slower, but their love never diminishing. On their 50th wedding anniversary in June of 1933, the celebration was even bigger than their silver anniversary had been. People came from all over Colorado, some traveling for days just to honor the couple that had become a legend in these parts. The story of how Mitchell had rescued Willa from the avalanche and how they had fallen in love had been told and retold so many times it had taken on a mythic quality. But sitting there surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Mitchell and Willa knew the truth. Their love was not a myth or a legend. It was real and solid and had stood the test of time. It had been tested by loss and hardship, by worry and fear, by all the things that life throws at you. And it had survived, even thrived. Mitchell was 81 now, and Willa was 76. They moved more slowly these days, and Mitchell used a cane to help with his balance. But they were still sharp-minded, still engaged with the ranch and the family, still deeply in love. They had long since handed over the daily operations of the ranch to William, but Mitchell still rode out most days to check on things, with Willa often joining him when her arthritis allowed. That night, after all the guests had gone home and the family had dispersed to their various houses on the property, Mitchell and Willa sat on their porch as they had done for 50 years. The night was warm and clear, perfect June weather. 50 years, Willa said wonderingly. Can you believe it? Best 50 years of my life, Mitchell said. Mine too. Willa rested her head on his shoulder. Do you remember what I said to you that first night when you brought me to the ranch? You said you had no home. And you said I did now. You were right. This has been my home, but not just the ranch. You have been my home, Mitch. Wherever you are, that is where I belong. Mitchell kissed the top of her head, emotion choking his throat. And you are mine. Always have been, always will be. They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. The wind whispered through the pines. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. And on the porch of the ranch house, two people who had loved each other for 50 years held hands and counted their blessings. Mitchell lived to be 89 years old, dying peacefully in his sleep one October night in 1941. Willa was with him, holding his hand as she had held it for nearly 60 years. His last words to her were, "I love you," and she whispered the same back to him through her tears. She followed him 2 years later, in the spring of 1943, at the age of 86. She had lived long enough to see the ranch thrive under her children and grandchildren, long enough to hold her first great-great-grandchild, long enough to know that everything she and Mitchell had built would continue. When her time came, she was ready. She died in the same bed where she had slept beside Mitchell for so many years. With her children gathered around her, her last words were about that day in the Avalanche. That moment when she had thought she was going to die, and then Mitchell had appeared like an angel. "He saved me," she whispered. "And then he loved me. What more could anyone ask for?" She was buried next to Mitchell on the hill overlooking the ranch, the spot where he had proposed all those years ago. On their shared headstone, their great-grandson had inscribed a simple truth. Here lie Mitchell and Willa Xavier. He rescued her from the snow. She said she had no home, and he replied she did now. Together they built a legacy of love that will last forever. And the ranch did continue, passed down through the generations, each one adding to it and improving it, but never forgetting the foundation that Mitchell and Willa had laid. The story of how they met, how they fell in love, how they built a life together from nothing but determination and devotion, was told to every child born into the family. It became part of the ranch's identity, a reminder that love could overcome anything, that home was not a place but a person, and that the greatest legacy you could leave was a family bound together by love. The house still stood, lovingly maintained by each generation. The porch where Mitchell and Willa had spent so many evenings was still there, and it was said that on quiet nights, if you sat very still, you could almost hear their voices, see their shadows side by side, feel the love that still lingered in the air. The ranch thrived into the next century and beyond, growing and changing with the times but never losing sight of its roots. And always at the heart of it all was the story of a cowboy who had been riding through a mountain pass on a winter day in 1882, who had heard a scream and made a choice to stop and dig, and who had found not just a woman buried in the snow but his own heart's desire. It was a love story for the ages, simple and true and enduring. A story of rescue and refuge, of loss and finding, of two people who had been meant for each other from the beginning of time. A story that proved that sometimes when you save someone's life, you save your own in the process. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love that Mitchell and Willa had created on that cold December day when he pulled her from the snow and offered her not just shelter but a home, not just survival but a life, not just safety but love. Their love story became the bedrock upon which the ranch stood, a reminder to all who came after that the greatest riches in life were not cattle or land or money, but the love you shared with another person, the family you built together, and the memories you created that would outlast even death itself. In the end, that was the real miracle. Not that Mitchell had found Willa in the snow, though that was remarkable enough. The real miracle was that they had found each other, two souls who fit together perfectly, who made each other better, who built something beautiful and lasting out of what could have been a tragedy. They had taken that moment of rescue and transformed it into a lifetime of love, and that love had rippled outward, touching not just their own lives but the lives of everyone who came after them. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was the truth that endured long after they were gone. Love conquers all. Home is where the heart is. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, the person you rescue from the snow becomes the person who rescues you right back.